An important step to make your songs or orchestrations more interesting is to invert your chords. Sorry about that. Anyway, as I was saying, that wasn't an inversion, that was a flip. Do you really think that was going to be funny? Oh boy, the inner critic is here today. Is this what you call a split personality? Hi, this is Sam. Today I will show you how powerful inversions really are and how a DAW really helps you in this regard, making the writing process a whole lot easier. Oh, and by the way, if you haven't subscribed, make sure to do so. And everybody knows about subscribing. Do you really have to say it? It's really annoying, okay? Will you be quiet? There are many ways to write music. For example, sitting down with your instrument. But most composers back in the day wrote mostly on paper. It can seem hard to hear the music in your mind when you write that way. But one of the advantages is that you can see the relations the notes have with each other. When you just play around with chords on, for example, a piano, we tend to play the same way we always have, out of physical habit, and we also don't always pay attention to the voice leading. Which isn't always absolutely necessary to do, but it tends to make your compositions sound better when you do so. The key editor in your DAW really helps to see it more clearly. Let's start with some simple chords. Here I created a very simple string piece with block chords having the root and the bottom and then just making a triad of each chord. It sounds like this. Yeah, those are some awesome chords, dude. Nice. I'm trying to create a video here. Please.
I'm trying to create a video. I'm so important.
I'm warning you. So these chords could work. No, they couldn't. Sip it. Okay, they're not great. In fact, they're pretty awful. Yeah, you are right about this one, but only this time. If you're new to chord structures, here is the simple rundown. A chord needs at least 3 voices, and we call those notes root, third, and fifth. That is, first note in the scale, third note in the scale, and the fifth note in the scale. Obviously, it can be a lot more complicated, but this is the basic chord structure. But you could make them more interesting by inverting them. You often hear a lot of inversions in Baroque music, partially to make it more interesting, but also because pretty much all instruments' voices had important melodies. And also, it wasn't cool to use chords we hear today in modern music, for example jazz. And those compositions didn't just have one melody instrument with an ensemble playing block chords underneath. Even the bassier instruments played melodies as well, which would be hard to do with just the root of the chords. In contrast, in modern music, there is often one solo melody and underlying chords. But obviously everything is allowed today. So, the point I'm making is not that you have to write music like they did back then. Of course, you can do that. The point is to get more out of your chords. And this is really helpful if you don't know how to play fancy jazz chords or you just don't want to sound like that. And here is where the DAW really comes in handy. I'll show you how. Let's see if we can make this string section a little bit more interesting than before. Now, instead of just selecting one track and changing everything, this is where it's good. You select all of it and you can have everything in front of you. Now here you see what notes on the left And here you see the relations to the notes. And you can see it's quite a blocky chords here. So we want to get some kind of voice leading so they don't jump so much. So let's see what it sounds like in the beginning here. So already here, I feel like we can do an inversion to make that chord interesting. So it's going to sound like a variation, but it's still the same chord. What I'm doing here basically is that I'm going to add cello to E. It's jumping up to the second chord note. Still within the chord, the bass here as well, obviously, because they play the same. And now, because we have E here, we don't want to double it here. It's not necessary. We can actually take it out and put it somewhere else. So we're going to move both the violins here up a step within the chord. So it jumps to C. And we're going to take the violin 2 up there a step. A bit of overlap. There you go. Now, how does that sound? Yeah, a little bit more interesting, yeah? It's got some variation, it's still the same chord. Okay, let's go on to the next chord. And as we see here, this is continuing, so that's really good voice line here. It's just the same note. Here looks pretty all right. Let's see what it leads to. Yeah, it works fine. That also works, but since we want to invert as much as possible to make it interesting and not just have block chords, we're going to invert this one. So I'm going to change this to play the minor in the bass. And also here as well. So, and let's see. I don't like this block chord here, so we're going to change that around a little bit. Let's see what we can do. What about if you move the triad away a little bit so it's not so close to each other? Strings really like this. So, for example, we can move this one down an octave. Yeah, so we'll take basically violas and move them down. Yeah, could do that. Now we're doubling the third, obviously, so maybe we don't want to do that. We could do that. It's a possibility. And then we could move. We could double the fifth. Well, let's see. How does that sound like? No, I don't like that very much. And that's probably because the third is double there. That's not a very good choice. Yeah, so it can stay. It can be the same note there. That works. Okay, let's see what that sounds like. What we can do here, instead of going back to the first chord, C, let's see if we can... Yeah, let's go to the fifth. There we go. So let's do that one as well. That's great voice leading. It's very close. That sounds much more interesting. We could also change these notes. You could stay up here if you wanted. So we have a C. Yeah, so you see the top line is staying on top all the time here. Here we obviously need a third as well. Yeah, so that's perfect voice leading because we got the G to F sharp, cello, sounds much better already because it's more together. What about if we move down? We don't want to move down the third, but we want to move down A perhaps, and D. We'll double that up. Yeah, it's way better. So here we are in F, and we want to have better voice leading. So it's an A. We can continue to be an A because A is the third. An F, so that's perfect. Can have it there. And there we see we go from D. So how about going to an F, for example, we can do. Sorry, F, maybe F. And then here we got, yeah. So we could go to, let's see, C, perhaps. So instead of just having a G here, what you could do is a little trick is that you change the whole chord. You still have a G in the bass, but you play a whole step below that root note. So basically you will move this down to an F instead. And then you get sort of a sus chord. Now, this voicing is not great, so we need to fix that. So we have an A on top, and that's perfect because A is in F. So I'm going to move that there, remove this one. So the violins are now up here. Now, let's see, we have an F there again. Could be cool, but I'm probably thinking we should go down to the C of F. And then this one here is a C. And we have F, C, and A. Let's see. Yeah, a little bit jazzier, maybe more modern. Maybe you don't want that. But just to make a little bit of variation, you can see that even changing the bass note might work. Okay. All right, I'm gonna speed this up so you don't have to sit here all day, and then I will play the whole song and you can look through what I've done. Now I have arranged the rest of the song. As you can see, I've spread out the notes a little bit and the bass line is more leading. Okay, let's see what it sounds like, the second part. Okay, so what I've done here is that you can see we start with the root note here, the C, but then the next is also C, but a C7. So instead of doubling that, I've taken the 7th in the bass, which is quite interesting. And this is perfect because that leads to the next chord, which is an F. But instead of having F, I'm having the A, which is the 3rd in that chord. So you see it leads perfectly from the B flat, which is the 7 in C, to A, which is the 3rd in F. Okay, and then I go on. And that's a diminished chord. So it's a G sharp, you could call it, or A flat, depending what scale you're in. One trick that you might not know is that you could actually play any diminished chord over any bass note. Go and try it out. It's quite interesting. It works. But in this case, I have gone with the A flat or G sharp diminished. One thing to think about when you voice those is that spread them out as much as possible. There's nothing wrong in having close voicing, but diminished chords especially sound good when you spread them out as much as possible. And then I go back to the first again, but now I have the 5th in the bass, as you can see. And the next chord, I actually have a D minor, but I have the 3rd in the bass. And then I go back to the first C chord again, but with an E in the bass. And then I go to the dominant, which is a G, but I have the D, the 5th in the bass. So you see almost all these chords are inverted. In fact, they all are. So invert as much as possible. It makes it interesting. It makes it feel different, even though you're using the same chords as before. Let's see. Let's listen to the whole thing. Maybe you already know about inversions, but maybe you haven't thought about that using the key editor in your DAW really makes it easier to write that way, just the way you would write music on a piece of paper. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. No, your videos suck. Hold on a second. Hey, What are you doing? Hey, take it easy. Okay, I just didn't. So, if you enjoy this video, perhaps hit the like button or even subscribe and hit that bell button as well so you will get notified for new videos. Now, go and write some music and don't watch too many YouTube videos because the inner critic really feeds off of those things. Now, take care until I see you next time.